Papal praise. Pope Francis is pleased with the shift in U.S.-Cuba policy, which he helped broker. Prayers for Pakistan. Communities worldwide pray for the victims of this week's mass killing of school children. Tough talk. Reaction from the Ukrainian Catholic Church to the Russian president's criticism of the West. And singing Sister. We talk with Sister Christina, famous for belting out pop songs in her religious habit. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, December 18th, 2014. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. Pope Francis praises the small steps of diplomacy that brought about a historic shift in U.S.-Cuba relations. The Pope saying to ambassadors to the Holy See, quote, "Today we are all happy because we saw two nations who were estranged for so many years take a step to bring them closer together." The Vatican Secretary of State says the involvement of Francis was decisive, even though the Holy See's diplomatic efforts go back years. Well, this week's sudden move by the president and the administration to thaw relations with Cuba is still being processed here in the nation's capital. Chief White House correspondent Suzanne LaFranchi is following reaction.
Brian, the new policy is getting mixed reviews and not along party lines. Those who oppose reestablishing ties with Cuba here in Washington say the communist nation's human rights abuses should not be rewarded. I spoke to one Cuban native who has spent 50 years fighting the Castro regime.
Cuban dissidents feel that they have been betrayed and abandoned.
At 16, Frank Calzone fled Castro's communist regime. He's dedicated his life to helping persecuted Cubans through aid and policy reform. Although delighted for the release of Alan Gross, he believes the president's actions will do nothing for the Cuban people. While the church has engaged with the Castro family in recent decades, Calzone believes Pope Francis was an unwitting pawn.
I think the president used the Pope as a way of giving some credibility to what he had done.
Many Republican leaders condemned Obama's action, including Senator Ted Cruz, a potential presidential candidate.
This was a mistake. This is throwing an economic lifeline to the Castros at a moment when their regime was vulnerable, and it was a serious mistake.
The president's executive action has congressional opponents threatening legislative blockades. But today, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest urged Congress to ease more restrictions.
The president has done all that he can do using his executive authority, and the remaining restrictions can only be removed through congressional action.
In the meantime, Frank Calzone remains committed to his life's work.
My mission of a senator, is to convince the Cuban people that the Castro brothers are the ones that have to go, that the Cuban people should remain in their island.
The GOP will control both the Senate and House come January 6th, but both Democrats and Republicans who oppose the measure will undoubtedly face pressure from industries wanting to do business in Cuba. From the White House, Suzanne LaFranchi, EWTN News Nightly.
Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Pakistan continues to mourn the victims of that horrific school massacre this week. Jason Calvi reports Catholics there and everywhere are in prayer for the victims.
These boys have seen things none of us ever should. Friends and teachers murdered. Today they returned to the gates of their school where they survived the Taliban attack. It's day 2 of 3 days of national mourning in Pakistan. In the capital, Catholic school students offered prayers for the victims and families.
The parents who lost their dear ones, may God bless their families and their souls. And that's why we are not celebrating our Christmas.
And outside a church in Karachi, protests against the Pakistani Taliban. The terror group left families to pick up the pieces of destruction and forced them to bury their loved ones, including the school principal.
She stood there by her duty. She didn't leave the children alone. She stayed among them and gave her life for them.
Another 124 students and staff are now recovering from their physical wounds. But a solution to the terror problem won't be immediate. Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif vows to go after terrorists until they're eliminated. Former President Pervez Musharraf says the country hasn't been strong enough against the outlaws. Farah Isfahani, who served in the Pakistani parliament, agrees.
Until and unless Pakistani politicians and the military decide to take out all terrorist groups and fight them all equally, we are not going to see an end to terrorism in Pakistan.
Little comfort for the victims' families and students left to carry on without 132 of their friends. Terrorism cases are not always straightforward in Pakistan. A man accused of organizing the 2008 Mumbai, India attacks that left over 160 dead was granted bail in Pakistan today. India has said the attack was in part conducted with the blessing of Pakistani authorities. Pakistan denies the charges. Brian?
We share our prayers with all who mourn. Thank you, Jason. Well, Ireland is debating its constitutional ban on abortion in light of a case involving a brain-dead mother in her 16th week of pregnancy. Family members want to turn off her life support, but doctors are required by law to defend the right to life of her unborn baby. Abortion debates are becoming increasingly common in Ireland, a predominantly Catholic nation. Ireland amended its abortion ban last year, legalizing abortion if the woman's life is endangered by a continued pregnancy. Well, the state of emergency has been lifted now in Ferguson, Missouri. The 30-day emergency order expired yesterday. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon issued the order anticipating violence over the grand jury decision on the shooting death of Michael Brown. The governor praises security forces for containing the unrest with no fatalities. The Boston Marathon bombing suspect made a court appearance today, the first in nearly a year and a half. Yohar Sanayev attended a pretrial hearing at a federal courthouse in Boston. He is charged with using weapons of mass destruction to kill 3 people and injure hundreds at the 2013 Boston Marathon. Jury selection is scheduled to begin January 5th. Sanayev has pleaded not guilty to a 30-count indictment. His lawyers have filed a motion to delay that trial. Pope Francis urges German, Lutheran, and Catholic leaders to continue working towards Christian unity. Francis says growing cooperation and sincere friendship results from a half-century of productive dialogue between Lutherans and Catholics. Meeting with their leaders today in Rome, the Pope noted the essential issues of family, marriage, sexuality, and human life. He acknowledged the upcoming 500th anniversary of the Reformation in 2017, referring to a, quote, profession of our common faith in one triune God. The Vatican has expanded its commission charged with protecting children from clergy sex abuse. We're joined from Rome by Monsignor Robert Oliver, Secretary of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. Monsignor Oliver, your commission is now up to its full membership. Do you think that the international nature of the members really reflects the universality of our church?
It does, Brian. Thank you. We're very grateful to our Holy Father for appointing people literally from around the world now. So we'll be able to take their experience, their knowledge, what they can bring to the commission and bring it all together now. It's to bring the best things we can to the Holy Father.
There are more women than men on this commission. There are also 2 victims, Peter Saunders and Mary Collins. It could be some very interesting gatherings coming ahead in light of the membership that this commission now consists of.
We're very much looking forward to what each brings. We know Peter Saunders, of course, because he was here in July for the meeting with the Holy Father. Very fine man. And Mary Collins has added so much to our meeting. They bring a very rich perspective. And we have some people who've had a lot of experience. We expect very lively discussions.
And Monsignor, I understand that members will also be able to bring in outside experts into some of their working discussions, right?
Very much so. That's the structure of the commission, actually, is to bring us together perhaps twice a year. And it's a very interdisciplinary group. When they come together, they'll be receiving proposals from groups that will be more focused of experts on particular issues. So the larger group will choose the issues that we will do. Then we'll put together groups of experts in local places, speaking very broadly, in Asia, in Australia, New Zealand. And they will put together proposals that will then come to the larger group, and we will bring them to the Holy Father.
So this commission will not actually deal with sex abuse cases, correct? This will still stay with the CDF. What does this commission actually address?
The distinction is very clear. The cases remain with the CDF. We deal with everything else. So we deal with the prevention of abuse, and we also deal with those who bring forward issues to us that need further study. And many of these issues are very different in different parts of the world. They need to be articulated differently in different cultures, different legal systems. There'll be a very rich interchange, I think, of the different people, considering the issues that are most important in the church today for bringing about the protection of our children.
Monsignor, do you see this as an opportunity for the church to really show the world how we can and should respond to this situation?
Very much, in the sense that we have a mission. We have a mission to all people. And what we're able to do is bring together people from all walks of life, from all different faiths, from the different areas in which we are, to bring together the experts in these areas. And as we do so, we will learn from them, and we hope that they will be learning from us as well, and that we'll be able to have a positive influence, a real mission that the church will be about the protection of all children and all vulnerable adults.
Well, I'm sure we'll be hearing much more from your commission in the weeks and months ahead. Monsignor Robert Oliver, the Secretary of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, joining us from Rome. Thank you, Monsignor, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Brian. Merry Christmas. God bless you.
Coming up, the Ukrainian Catholic Church in the U.S. reacts to Russian President Putin's tough talk against the West. And a new report says inaccurate prenatal tests are leading some women to abort their babies. On Thursday, December the 18th, thank you for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Russian President Vladimir Putin again accuses the West of trying to destroy his country. Today, he vowed to fix Russia's economy and insisted his military played no part in the conflict in Ukraine. Wyatt Goolsbee joins us now with more.
Brian, despite falling oil prices and a Russian ruble losing value every day, Vladimir Putin is not making any political concessions. Today, he denied any involvement in the ongoing violence in Ukraine. Instead, he is once again blaming others for provoking problems in Eastern Europe.
The ruble has lost more than half its value. The economy is in crisis, and Russian aggression in Ukraine has prompted sanctions and mistrust from the West. But during today's annual press conference, Putin remained as defiant as ever.
We are not attacking anyone. We are not warmongers. We are only defending our interest, and the dissatisfaction of our Western partners are huge because of this.
So far, Putin's tone seems to be working in his home country. Despite fierce protests earlier today, nearly 80% of the Russian population still claim to support him. But the Ukrainian president this week looked to build support from Western nations and the EU as his country tries to fend off its neighbor. Political turmoil engulfed Kiev in January. Since April, 4,700 people have died in battles between pro-Russian insurgents and Ukrainian government troops. The conflict in his home country is on Father Wasyl Karuk's mind. The Ukrainian Catholic priest now lives in Washington, but talks with his family back home every week.
I always have concern about how they are doing there. Are they upset?
Father Karuk says the Ukrainian Catholic Church is a beacon of support for the people, and he encourages Catholics everywhere to pray for wisdom for Vladimir Putin and for people living in Ukraine.
With God, everything is possible.
The United Nations estimates 500,000 people have been displaced since the fighting started in eastern Ukraine. So far, there are no signs the conflict is coming to an end. Brian.
Thank you, Wyatt Goolsbee. And a recent investigative report finds prenatal tests are unregulated and they're overselling the accuracy of their results. Prenatal tests screen unborn babies for disabilities such as Down syndrome and autism. The study by the New England Center for Investigative Reporting finds companies selling these tests don't clarify that they're not reliable as a diagnosis. The study says women are getting abortions based on these tests alone. The report also finds these screens aren't subject to approval by the Food and Drug Administration because of a regulatory loophole. Catherine Zeltner spoke with one of the investigators.
We're joined by Elizabeth Daly from the New England Center for Investigative Reporting. Elizabeth, why aren't a lot of women getting that recommended second opinion on their prenatal test results?
Yeah, it seems like they should, but they and the doctors do not understand that the test is not diagnostic. That's the end of it. They think the result is true.
So the FDA is now trying to regulate these prenatal tests. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, so the FDA is trying to regulate a broad class of diagnostic tests, including prenatal. However, they are expected to take 9 years to phase in. We'll know more after early January when a hearing will be held in Washington on this.
You spent 3 months on this investigation. Which finding surprised you most?
I think the lack of regulation around these tests was somewhat stunning to me. It's unbelievable in some ways that no one is independently vetting the claims of these companies to make sure the test does what they say they do. And it's very high-risk results, right? I mean, doctors and patients appear to be acting on this information as their diagnostic tests with very tragic results on occasion.
Elizabeth, thank you for your insight. Elizabeth Daly from the New England Center for Investigative Reporting.
We're glad to welcome back Jeanne Monahan, the president of March for Life, now Jeanne Mancini. Congratulations on your nuptials.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Jeanne, if parents find out that their baby will have disabilities, how likely is it that that baby will be aborted?
Babies that receive a poor prenatal diagnosis are highly disproportionately targeted for abortion. So say, for example, that a baby tests positive for Downs, it is 90% likely, 60 to 90% likely that that baby will not have the chance to survive. They will be aborted.
How sad. And parents, of course, fear for the quality of life for a disabled child. How would you ease those fears?
Well, there's two things. First of all, there was a wonderful study that came out by Dr. Brian Skotko from Harvard that was, it basically was a survey measuring families with a person with Down syndrome in the family, and it was measuring happiness levels in the family. And it was unbelievable how happy these families were. I think that they were happier than your average American family, to be honest. I mean, even adolescents, siblings would say, you know, they were very happy about their sibling who had Down syndrome and life in general. And so subjectively speaking, with this survey, I think that's, you know, we know that people have very happy lives with Down syndrome. Not to say that there aren't different obstacles and different things.
It's very difficult, but there's still a lot of joy.
A lot of joy, but in a way that the deeper question is, why are we judging the quality of someone's life? Because the dignity of the human person isn't about whether someone has a perfect life or not, or what the quality of their life is. It has to do with their inherent dignity of who they are as a human being, regardless of if they have a disability or not.
God is the judge, and God gives the life. So are there any benefits to prenatal testing, for instance, to be prepared for special needs?
Sure. I think prenatal testing can be a positive thing. The unfortunate thing is that often it's not correct. You know, it's not 100% accurate. These tests that we heard about recently with this study in New England, it's a screening test. It's a screening test. It's not 100% accurate. So for someone to make some definite decisions based on life, based on the test, it's not a good idea. But sure, it can absolutely prepare us for possibilities of things ahead, and it can educate us. And more information is good information. But sadly, what we're seeing in our culture of death is that these are used as a precursor to abortion.
Well, the culture of life explodes here in D.C. in a little more than a month. And isn't this year's March for Life focused on this group?
Very much. With the March for Life every year, we try to choose a theme that is really sort of cutting edge in terms of the culture of life, really the most pressing issues. And because these little special ones are disproportionately targeted for abortion, we want to do our part in terms of educating about the beauty of every life being a gift, regardless of how it's conceived, regardless of if they have a disability or not. Every life is a gift.
Every life is a gift. And we'll be talking with you more about the March for Life. Jeanne Mancini, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, we show you the work of an Argentine artist who calls himself a disciple of Pope Francis. And we'll introduce you to Sister Christina, Italy's singing sister sensation. The Lord put it clearly, you cannot serve two masters. You have to choose between God and money. Today's tweet from Pope Francis. Thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly on this Thursday. I'm Brian Patrick. U.S. death sentences and executions hit historic lows in 2014. The Death Penalty Information Center released its year-end report today. 35 inmates were executed in America this year, a 10% drop from last year and a 20-year low. Just 3 states, Texas, Missouri, and Florida, account for 80% of those executions. Death sentences also reached a 40-year low this year, part of a steady decline in that practice. And contributing to concerns about capital punishment, 7 former death row inmates were exonerated this year of all charges. Richard Dieter, Executive Director of the Death Penalty Information Center, authored today's report. Richard, do you think public opinion is veering away from capital punishment, and could it eventually be abolished?
It is veering away. It used to be as high as 80% support. Now it's down to about 60% support. And moreover, people are supporting life without parole as an alternative to the death penalty.
Still, 35 cases is a lot. Do these cases have anything in common?
Well, 2/3 of them were members of minorities. Almost all of them involved victims who were white. That's a disparity that shouldn't occur. And 80% of them were in just 3 states. So 43 of our 50 states had no executions.
So what's with Texas, Missouri, and Florida? Are there certain judges, certain courts that are kind of dictating this trend?
Well, the death penalty is largely a political phenomenon. We don't use it very much in our criminal justice system. So these courts in those states reflect the politics of those. You know, they want the death penalty. It's understandable. But even in Texas this year, a judge ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional. He was only one judge, but still, that's an interesting phenomenon.
We had some terrible situations, botched executions. 7 inmates on death row exonerated of all charges after serving many years in prison. Do you think that these instances will help to move us away from this and to a different approach?
No question. Innocence is the issue that is moving people who used to support the death penalty, conservatives, evangelicals, all sorts of people. They don't want innocent people executed, and the people who were released this year show that that remains a risk.
So is it clear that the death penalty is not an effective way to deal with crime, or do some people still believe that it is?
Well, some people still believe it, but 35 executions in a country with, unfortunately, 14,000 murders, there's no connection between the death penalty and crime. It's more of a symbolic thing, and that's not much of a reason for taking human life.
It's always been considered a deterrent. Are you saying that it doesn't deter crime?
I'm sure every punishment has some deterrent value. The question is it more of a deterrent than life imprisonment with no parole? Are prisoners really thinking through that? You know, the studies haven't shown that that's true.
All right, from the Death Penalty Information Center, the author of the report released today, Richard Dieter, thank you for taking time in your busy schedule to be with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And 2 sculptures now inside the Vatican Gardens are a mix of art and faith in practice. Argentine-born artist Alejandro Marmo created the statues using salvaged metal from the Pontifical villas in Castel Gandolfo. The statues are named Christ the Worker and Our Lady of Luján, the patron of Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. He uses recycled materials to counter what the Holy Father calls a throwaway culture.
I think that the message contains art, and that is that everything that is discarded in society can be newly incorporated through an aesthetic of hope.
Marmo has called himself a disciple of Cardinal Bergoglio, now Pope Francis, for more than a dozen years. He says he wants to engage with people on the margins of society to create more sculptures using existing materials in a redemptive way. Well, she took Italy by storm and has become a sensation around the world. 25-year-old Sister Cristina Scuccia is defending her choice of releasing a cover of Madonna's racy 1984 hit, Like a Virgin. She said it is an interpretation that she gives it. She says that she has been transformed by the love of God because it's His person who in the beginning doesn't have meaning in her life, but at the moment she is touched. For me, this is the touch of God, and from that moment, life has completely changed. Those are her words. Sister Cristina gave Pope Francis a copy of her new single at a recent general audience. Well, for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. We close tonight with an unusual sight, a completely dark dome at St. Peter's in Rome. Tomorrow, newly installed LED lights will add new brilliance to this iconic basilica. We'll cover that for you tomorrow. Until then, good night and God bless you.